Hash, the unbreakable warrior. Kale had seen empires rise and crumble, witnessed the ebb and flow of power like the tides of the vast sand sea. He had fought alongside legendary heroes and fallen kings, his loyalty purchased not with gold, but with respect and a cause worth fighting for. Now, the sands of time were running out, whispering of a final battle, a darkness rising in the distant west. He fought his way towards the heart of the fortress, leaving a trail of fallen enemies in his wake. Each step brought him closer to the source of darkness, the Sorcerer King who orchestrated this symphony of suffering. Finally, he stood before the sorcerer, a figure cloaked in shadow, his eyes burning with malevolent power. A wave of dark energy erupted from the sorcerer, slamming into Kale, sending him crashing against the stone wall. The aged warrior struggled to his feet, his breath ragged, his body bruised. The sorcerer's laughter echoed through the chamber, a sound devoid of warmth or humor, cold as the grave. "You are a relic," the sorcerer sneered, his voice like gravel scraping against stone, a fading ember in the face of true power. "You cannot win." Kale coughed, blood staining his lips. He knew the sorcerer spoke the truth. His strength was waning, his body failing. But his spirit, the spirit of the unbreakable warrior, remained unyielding. "Even the smallest ember," he rasped, his voice hoarse but firm, "can ignite a fire that consumes entire forests." With a roar that echoed the defiance in his heart, Kale launched himself at the sorcerer. His movements were slower, his strikes less precise, yet each blow carried the weight of a life spent fighting for justice. The fight was brutal, a dance of desperation and defiance. And in the end, it was not the strength of his body, but the unyielding spirit of the unbreakable warrior that prevailed. He landed a final blow, his blade piercing the sorcerer's heart. As darkness consumed the sorcerer, light returned to the eyes of his soldiers. The monstrous creatures dissolved into dust, and the fortress crumbled into ruin. Kale watched the sun rise over the horizon, painting the sky with the colors of hope. He had won, but at a cost. His body was broken, his life force fading. He slumped against a fallen pillar, his gaze fixed on the rising sun. He turned his gaze towards the setting sun, a crimson orb sinking into the dunes. There, the whispers spoke of a sorcerer king amassing power, fueled by a thirst for conquest. This was no mere warlord, but a being of shadow, wielding magic that twisted the very fabric of the desert, birthing monstrous creatures from nightmares. A single tear traced a path down his weathered cheek, not from fear, but from the bittersweet knowledge that his fight was over. The unbreakable warrior had finally found peace. A guttural cough rattled Kale's chest, a harsh reminder of his waning strength. He knew this battle might be his last, yet fear was a stranger. He had danced with death too many times, stared into its abyss, and emerged unscathed. His fearlessness wasn't a lack of fear, but a mastery over it, a quiet acceptance of the inevitable. He reached into the folds of his worn cloak, his fingers tracing the familiar grooves of a worn leather hilt. The whisper of steel followed as he drew his ancient sword, its blade reflecting the dying sunlight. It had tasted the blood of countless enemies, yet remained unblemished, a testament to the unyielding spirit of its wielder. The journey west was long and arduous. Sandstorms raged, thirst gnawed at his throat, and the whispers of doubt echoed in the vast emptiness. Yet, Kale pressed on, his resolve fueled by the stories of suffering that reached him on the desert wind. Tales of villages razed and families enslaved. Finally, the silhouette of a black fortress marred the horizon, a jagged scar on the face of the setting sun. Around it, an army of darkness stirred, a grotesque menagerie of twisted creatures and men with eyes devoid of light. Kale stood alone, a solitary figure against the tide of darkness, his weathered face set in grim determination. He raised his sword, the steel glinting under the dying sun. A silent challenge, a beacon of defiance against the encroaching darkness. The unbreakable warrior was ready for his final stand. The battle was a whirlwind of sand and steel. Kale moved with the agility of a man half his age, his blade a blur of silver against the black tide. He cut down scores of enemies, each swing of his sword carrying the weight of 100 years of experience, the fury of a protector, the sorrow of a witness to countless tragedies.